Bien, les saludamos a todos desde Córdoba, Argentina.
We'd like to greet everybody from Cordoba. The images you were watching are from Cordoba, the second day of the first Global Forum on Tourism and Economic Development in the framework of the 5th World Forum on Local Economic Development, a very intense agenda on this 3rd of June, and we're going to introduce the next panel of the day. Touristic innovation, key factor for the recovery of the touristic activity. Moderator, Santiago Novoa. Santiago Novoa is a specialist in tourism at the OAS. He's licensed in legal sciences, graduated from the Diplomatic Academy in Ecuador, and has a master in social sciences from the University of Amsterdam. As Ecuadorian diplomat, he developed several roles in the Ministry of Foreign Relations in his country, especially in economics and multilateral connections, and he represented Ecuador in councils and embassies. He was acting member of the OAS. He was re-elected several times as VP of subcommissions and work groups. During his experience as Ecuadorian diplomat, he was part of many meetings, international meetings. Right now, he is executive at the comprehensive development of the OAS. Good morning, Santiago. The floor is yours to present the next panel. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Cordoba for having invited us to this event. I had the opportunity to see Cordoba, to visit Cordoba. I would have loved to go back. Unfortunately, the pandemic didn't allow it, but it's a beautiful province. It's an amazing province. I was very well impressed when I saw it, and I'd like to congratulate you for this excellent event that we are enjoying. Speaking of innovation, I think we are in a key moment of innovation. This event would never have been in our minds some years ago, and it's been perfect. It's been very, very good. It's the best online event that I've participated in this year, and I've had many, at least once a week. I've had different events. This has been excellent. The speakers were excellent, and the topics were very important, very relevant for local development. I am a huge fan of local development, and I think it's very important for us to start there to promote local development. Innovation is going to be key now. The world was already changing before, but now it's doing so at high speed. If we don't start using new technologies, we're going to be completely out of date. I'm going to talk a little bit about the speakers in my panel. First, we'll hear from Saudi Arabia. Natalia Bajona, she couldn't be here. She's Director of Innovation, Education and Investment in the WTO. She leads the innovation strategy, education strategy and investment strategy in the WTO to promote universal tourism that is accessible and sustainable. She was the first Director of Innovation at the WTO. She has introduced the factors of education and investment, and she positioned the WTO as a referent in innovation in the OAS. She was recognized in the UN mapping of innovation digital capacities. Her work is to identify startups and disruptive programs and to introduce them to the OAS. And she's always looking for entrepreneurs to grow for a promising future in all regions. I'm not going to go on with her curriculum. Many of us know her, and we know all her experience. The other panelist that is going to be with us is Adolfo Reyes. He is a membership and partnership chief at the WTTC. He has more than 20 years of experience in the travel and tourism sector. He's fellow member and fellowships, and she coordinates the WTTC to introduce SMEs in the Council's initiatives. He's a tourism passionate person, and he cooperates with members and representatives to improve opportunities and the positive impact in our sector. As you can see, we have very great panelists. They are going to share the point of view from the institutions such as the WTO and the WTTC. They're going to share their experience. People who are every day looking at the disruptive changes that we have around the world, and most particularly in the tourist sector. And I think that with his participation, we will be able to have a better understanding as to where we're going, the needs, a very important topic that Adolfo is going to mention, and we'll discuss more about SMEs. Large companies have the capacity to be able to adapt themselves to these new realities, but the problem is for small and medium enterprises, especially those that are located in rural areas where the tourism is actually going to. We'll discuss that later. Very important, the topic of training. There is a world issue with a lack of people who work in the touristic industry, and we have to fix that, and we have to improve the quality of training for those employees. Otherwise, we'll be not very competitive in the world in the future. So right now, we have problems to get people engaged again in the touristic sector. We have to solve that, and this problem may affect us in the mid and long term. And without further ado, let's watch Natalia's video. Please roll the clip. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. You've heard from me many times the challenges of tourism are the same as the ones we had before COVID-19, but COVID-19 helped us speed those up. What are the challenges that tourism have? First, very clear, is sustainability. In the past, I don't know if you've seen this before, but more than 50% of waste that were produced in the Mediterranean were only in Culmes in the summertime. We were ending with the oceans and nature. Not only that, capital cities and the most modern touristic cities in Europe, we also had anti-tourism movements before COVID because we had an overload of things that affected the cities because of tourism. So it was not very sustainable. That's why today the touristic model that we need to develop is a model that includes all communities. It must include young people. It must include fair pay, crafts and arts and crafts that have to be paid in a fair way. Also, culinary developments that have to be fairly paid. And we have to support rural tourism and to provide sustainability. But remember, sustainability is not just supporting the environment, but it's using technology for the greater good, to link communities, those who are the most vulnerable ones, people who are disabled, those who actually need and want to see an opportunity to work. And it's without a doubt that we have to have that kind of ethics and data technology so that we promote responsible tourism, and the user or the tourist needs to be at the center of attraction for this model. Second, education, no doubt about that. I think tourism is a great employer of young people and women around the world. However, 50% of the young people who work in tourism, they only have high school skills. And 50% of those young people say that they want to be entrepreneurs in the sector. Therefore, we need to strengthen education, in our case, through the online Tourism Academy. All of you can access to free courses, and that way we can spread knowledge and skills to work in tourism. Not only technological skills, but customer service, vocational skills, to make it a much more professional sector with added value jobs. Third, something very important, innovation, but open innovation, connectivities and connection between large corporations and entrepreneurs to create impactful models. COVID, thanks to technology, we can issue different applications that will help us track so that we track tourists so that we can go back and travel again. So it's not necessary for different pandemics or COVID to hit us to understand this. We need to be proactive. It's done, and it's very well done in many different countries. We need to be the ones that become the reference. We have invested more than $20 billion on innovation in tourism. That means that there are many opportunities. However, despite investment, we need to have strategic alliances between the large corporations, the huge hotel chains, and the huge travel agencies with these startups that already have very attractive business models to create a much more sustainable, modern, and including business model. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalia. I highlight the rural tourism, the importance to young people and women, and what you said, that most of the younger people do not have access to high school education, how we can improve this to improve the capacity of this sector. Another issue is the new apps to travel. Yesterday, I think they talked about the passports. I think Europe will, Latin America and America in general, an agreement was not achieved, but these passports will help us travel again and also try to coordinate all of the apps that are and approve them so that this helps tourists and tourists feel more reliable and more confident about travel. Now I'll give the floor to Adolfo. Thank you, Santiago, and thanks to the event organizers. I'll first begin with a brief presentation on the WTTC, some hard data, and the meaning of tourism. This is something we've done as tourism, that is to provide data on the hands of governments for them to make decisions that support tourism, and also highlight the local and regional importance of tourism in terms of economy, and also tourism used as a tool for recovery and innovation. The WTTC represents the private sector of travels. We represent each of the different sectors, as you can see on the screen: airliners, airports, cruise liners, tour operators, and other companies that they are interested in tourism. So we gather the leadership of these companies, as you can see on the screen. This is just an example of presidents and CEOs that are represented and that support the WTTC. As you can see, not only the most important companies in the world, there are over 200 members in the council. We also have a section that gathers SMEs that can join us, given the importance as regards job creation and the development of local economies. Now, until last year, tourism had been growing for 10 years at really fast levels compared to global economy. And since the pandemics, and these are 2020 data, tourism dropped. So when we accounted for 10% of the global economy, now 5.5%, $4.7 billion. So it's a decline of almost 70%. Even more damaging is the losses of jobs. 334 million jobs, and now 272. That is a drop of 62 million people that have lost their jobs due to the pandemics. And this was not worse because governments set out systems that supported companies that could actually support their business. But this is at risk. Last year, one out of 4 new jobs were related to tourism. We are really an important labor force, and we have to recover this. So having this in mind, here you can see the decline of tourism in the different sectors. Declines have been really significant globally. You can see that countries being more dependent on tourism have dropped even more. They are in dark green, and countries that are not as dependent have had a slightly lower drop, but it's been significant, accounting for over 40%, and in terms of employment, 17 to 27% in the case of North America. As you can see, the impact is quite significant. Some key issues just to understand what to do in terms of recovery. On the one hand, you can see the crisis in the past, such as the financial crisis or 9/11. These were crises that it took us 3 years to recover, and the financial crisis was much faster. And as regards COVID-19 crisis, 22, 23, the recovery we expect it'll be much faster. That is, reopening borders will actually improve the situation. Now, as regards innovation in tourism, let me highlight 3 main concepts: geolocalization, augmented reality, and digital identity and biometrics. These 3 areas will help improve tourism. Geolocalization helps destinations mobilize their people to have fewer people and fewer clusters. So if you know where people are located, then people can be informed of other areas by putting some financial benefits. Augmented reality, you can see how, for example, a Colosseum looked like in the best times. You can see what happened before, the history, and so people can actually know more without having additional guides, just with the use of technology. And digital identity and biometrics will help us travelers be safer, faster, and so that more people can actually travel in the future. To conclude, this is about the future of travels and tourism. There's an acceleration regarding the digital agenda with the webinars we are carrying out these days, and also as a result of biometrics and digital identity, the sustainable agenda, as Natalie had mentioned, some of the protocols that have been implemented will remain to be able to coexist with the virus. And we also need to, as I said, coexist with the virus. These are 4 aspects we need to consider for the future and to continue adapting. So this is the end of my presentation. The floor again back to Santiago. Thank you, Rodolfo. Your presentation was really interesting. The issue of employment that you discussed, this issue is really having a great impact right now. There are countries that were able to keep employment rates, but Latin America, Africa, or Asia, developing countries mainly, the impact has been much greater. In the case of the United States, probably it was not as hard, but unemployment has been really severe. But a lot of these people that lost their jobs moved to other sectors. I was told recently by someone that specializes in tourism when in 2007, 2010, in the Spanish financial crisis, a lot of people moved to tourism, and they stay there. Now, those people that lost their jobs in tourism moved to other sectors and will not go back to tourism. And there's this issue of training. So, because how much time do you need to train people, and these people will now go back to their jobs? And at some point, I think we need to consider the issue of jobs and income levels, and we see that people don't want to go back because they are getting the aid from the states, so it's better for them to live on that aid. But this is just a small part of the problem. The problem is that in the sector, we have really low-paid jobs. These are low-paid jobs. So how we can improve this? This is just an idea that is coming up, and this is a discussion that has been really becoming relevant. Your presentation was really good, and thank you very much for it. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to focus on the 4 aspects that you mentioned, because each of the 4 points you talked about, I think, deserves to be addressed in a different presentation. So we can see that Madrid, Barcelona, I'm talking about geolocalization, they can do it. I mean, the big countries can do it. But how can we have countries such as Ecuador, where I come from, Bolivia, Ghana in Africa, or in the Pacific, Asia Pacific, how can they implement these new technologies? How can they do it? And SMEs, because a lot of large companies will be able to make these changes that the world is, we're being pushed. So we'll have, on the one hand, a highly developed world, Europe and the United States, for example, and then the other part of the world that is behind. And we can see this already taking place in the World Forum on Economic Development. Due to automation, more jobs will be created in developed countries, but in developing countries will be losing jobs. So the situation will become more difficult. So how do you view this? On the one hand, it's a reality. I mean, infrastructure is always focused on larger cities that attract investment, and governments have to support these companies, because even though the focus will be these large urban centers, but also on smaller cities, so that they can have an access to all of this innovation, so that it's not only left to large capital cities. And this innovation at the same time should work on less densely populated cities in order to highlight the benefits, tourism benefits, so that this would attract tourism. So we need to work on these 2 areas. I mean, infrastructure, government supporting the cities, and then content generation, so that tourists are attracted to these destinations. And technology is used as a means to those places, and they can go there, and so this would enable to create jobs. And what about the SMEs? I mean, how could you have SMEs use this technology. If you're not online, nobody knows you. This is the issue, right? So you need to be online. You need to be present. How do you have an indigenous community, for example, in the Argentine Patagonia or the Chile Patagonia? How can they become present and do not depend on an intermediary for them to actually show what they have? Because oftentimes these technologies are costly. It is certainly a very difficult challenge because it requires resources, but there are clear examples on how SMEs, for example, in Bolivia, these women that weaves hats and masks with their raw materials, and they were able to use technology so that these small communities, these communities united to work together. They joined efforts, and they had the necessary channels to upload this information on the social media to get to the people. That it can be done, of course. Support is needed. Knowledge, Natalia talked about it already. She talked about education, how important it is to educate people in the rural areas, urban areas, so that they can join. People have the necessary knowledge, and that these communities that are isolated are not are closer. This I understand. It has some negative things, but it's important to really integrate communities and small businesses. Or content generators, or customs, or clothes maker, so that they can actually promote what they do. And this is the best attraction for international tourists, to actually get to know the people and the natives, and show, so they can see what they do. That really unique jobs, identities, that has to be put forward and integrated into the global community. In one of the talks I heard in the World Forum, they spoke about orange economy, and what you're saying, I think, is related to that. The importance as a sector to promote innovation, creativity in rural areas, where most of the jobs will actually be created. So here we can see an opportunity we have in the sector to grow. As somebody said yesterday, this is a cross-sectional sector because it affects many other sectors. So this is, I think, a very important challenge, and I believe that large companies, members to WTTC, have an important role to play. So we need to collaborate, to cooperate, because if a destination is damaged, it affects us all. In tourism, if a destination declines, everybody declines. And in this crisis, we can see this very clearly. We were all dragged by the crisis, and we need to protect these rural communities. We need to protect them. We need to have this vision of sustainability in order not to affect them. So they can join. They have to join without losing their identity. We have to consider this so that the identity is not lost. It can remain through time. This identity that arises from small communities. And innovation can lead to that. We can have a lot of Disneylands. We don't want more Disneylands. We want more Machu Picchus, more Cuscos, more Galapagos Islands. We want identity. And this is really important, and we have to protect that. Unfortunately, globalization is a phenomenon, not an ideology. We have to adapt to it. We try to mitigate it as much as possible. And I think the role we have as tourism is to support this so that identity is not lost. Thank you for mentioning identity, because identity is really crucial. In a document released by the Smithsonian Institute, in the Declaration of the Road of the Incas, the document stated that tourism helps indigenous communities not to go to the cities, or if they go to cities, they come back to their communities so that cultures and languages are not lost. And so innovation can be disruptive in this sense, or it can help us traditions to be maintained. There's something interesting that you mentioned about Bolivia and the Lake Titicaca and the other islands. They use technology a lot, and when you get there, you're really impressed by the technology they're using, and it's a good experience, but we have to be careful for them not to become a distant. Thank you very much, Adolfo. Anything else you'd like to add to? Thank you very much. And again, SMEs account for 8 out of 10 companies in the global sector. We have to protect them. They have been very affected, together with women, young people, and minorities. We need to support them. And we see a light at the end of the tunnel. We have to work in this direction. And we need to focus on the areas that are open, and so that the people can begin to travel. But we seem to see a reactivation very soon, and we expect others can join us to create more tourism. Just one more thing. We're going through a problem. I mean, a supply-demand type of problem. We have a lot of demand, but very few places. And there is an opportunity, I think. We have a lot. Because many people were left behind, we need to find ways to recover them, because we have many opportunities. Tourists will continue traveling, not as before, but I think in 4 years we'll go back to previous levels. Thank you very much. A very important challenge. Adolfo, thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers of this event for giving us this opportunity to share our knowledge. Natalia, Adolfo, thank you for your presentations on these disruptive situations that is affecting. We're finding the way, and changes lead to deep changes, and if we don't adapt, then we're left behind. Thank you.
Bien, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Santiago Novoa. Excellent moderation and your ideas. Thanks to Natalia.